Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to the Newcastle Historic Area Commission meeting. It is Thursday, February 8th, 2024. If we could all state our names for roll call starting with you, please. Lisa Doak, Sarah Hayward Vivas,
Michael Westman,
Cynthia Batten.
we have a quorum. So we don't have any older or tabled applications. It looks like any new applications that were listed have been processed as a tier 1. And the only item that we have on the agenda tonight, apart from reviewing the minutes from January meeting, or it wasn't January, it was November, this last time this commission met, is we have a discussion about the gas meters that were installed last year, and Commissioner Batty has prepared a presentation that we are not able to project. But we can still have that discussion if you'd like to discuss what's in the presentation.
Are people here thinking that we're going to discuss something related to you all, or did you come because we're wonderful people to listen to and so much fun?
a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. Oh my God, we're going to disappoint you on the second half.
I've been needing to see Layla for 5 months, so I thought I'd come.
She's running late, but
No,
she's stuck in traffic, but once she arrives, we can open it up to public comment.
I just don't want people to stay here if their things are, I mean, you all can stay, you can stay here till midnight maybe even, but if you don't have to be here, then.
Oh, no, but it's also, it's an open meeting and,
Sure,
and
of course.
no.
Do we have to be here if our name is on this?
No, you don't. If you had an application submitted,
I don't know who submitted the application, but I know I'm having work on the chimney done.
okay,
But so maybe it was the roofer that did it.
okay, yep. So that was a staff decision. So they should have heard from Layla. But you're welcome to
That's
stay.
why they need to stay.
You don't.
Just wanted to make sure.
That discussion will be very interesting.
You all come and watch the chimney be. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a project on the agenda, and I just wanted to be present just in case anything was a question. Personally, I just kind of wanted to sit here to listen. If you guys don't mind.
We'll be very glad to have you here.
Thanks.
Welcome.
So yours is the one on the Strand? Yes, and I got pre-approved, got notification about it.
Philip?
This is Philip.
Oh, Philip, okay.
I'm AJ. Well,
Oh, okay. Oh, that's nice. Nice to meet you. Yeah, cool. All right. I'm not trying to tell you guys to leave. It's such a burden to come here anyway. I'm mindful of your life. All right, I'm shutting up for a moment. Do you want to say anything about the gas project before it started?
Sure. So there were some concerns voiced to members of the commission, some concerns from members of the commission regarding how the installation of these gas meters in the Delmarva project, how that was conducted. And the
end, but you guys can.
the member of the commission who initially brought this discussion wanted to have this discussion is not here. But Jeff Bergstrom is also not here, our code enforcer. Initially, we were going to have the conversation in March, but since you put together this information, could you?
I guess if, real quick before, since Layla and I were the only ones who were at the meeting where it was brought forward to be put on the agenda as an item. So to give a little bit of background, since Kevin is not here today, Kevin Wade was the one that wanted to add it as an agenda item a few months ago. And we were waiting until we had a decent quorum, or the full group to come to discuss it. So the main issues at that time were raised because the work was still being done. And people were concerned and bringing forth concerns about where it was put on their home, because it was, Delmarva was still putting them on the public right of way where it was commonly in view, and many residents thought that it should not be on the public right of way, on the view from the public right of way, for obvious reasons, because we're a historic district. So the concern was brought up primarily for the optics of it, of us as HAC, even though as far as we understood, it was never brought in front of HAC, but just the optics of we designate the streetscape, and this is intrusive to the streetscape, even though there's no addendums in our guide as to how to interpret that. It was our understanding that it was left up to individual homeowners, and then the discussion arose as to, was it really up to the homeowners, or is Delmarva really supposed to be putting them out of the public view in the first place? And then the second tier that was brought to the attention was, what was Delmarva's responsibility to then obscure these if they did have to put them in the public right of way, or not in the public viewscape? So there was some discussions that initially they were supposed to hide it with plantings, or they were supposed to hide it with an approved lattice work covering. And then the question was raised, is who's the onus on? Is the individual resident supposed to approach Delmarva about that and have their option of which was going to be put there? Or was Delmarva supposed to be doing this on each house that they altered? Which clearly, if it was the latter, they're not doing. So those are the things that under our purview as HAC that we can really, we have any jurisdiction over, because we do have rules about streetscape. So that's where that came from. But
And then, if I may then piggyback, just to recap for those who hadn't been part of those conversations, when all of this first came up, which I believe was 2020, and then we had Fox in 2021. And I cannot speak to the contract with Delmarva. I cannot speak to that aspect. What I can speak to is the conversations that we had that were originally, the idea was this would be put, and homeowners have the option to have it either put inside or put outside. Then the question became, this is a historic district, does it come under purview of HAC or not? And we're like, anything that's visible on the exterior should either come to HAC or be done in a way that meets the guidelines, because that's what will be appropriate. Then the conversation become, if it came, the threshold would be if it has to be on the exterior, where possible, it should be on the side, on an alley, an area that's not too visible from the. There's some properties where that's not an option, it has to be put on the sidewalk or the front if it's particularly like a road. So the next step was, and these were conversations in 20 and then in 21, and followed up a little bit too. Delmarva came, where at the time representative showed some options, what had been used at other places, because some are lattice, some are plastic, some are covers. We also looked at areas, I even looked at things that were done in Europe where they actually literally have boxes, but then they come and they paint the boxes to match the brick, to match the stone, but was told that was not necessarily an option because of the particular fairly large meters that they put out there. So the next step was to look at options of different types of planters, down to the granularity of different shapes of planters and different types of plants. And then obviously the lattice work, which was, I thought, the most appropriate, because you can cut it, you flip it open, except my take was you had to make sure that it was low enough not to come and stand in front of windows or anything like that. The next step was walking through the whole district with representatives from the contractor, looking at areas where they had put some and looking at different conditions. And there it became, the issue was, in many cases, the lattice work would probably be most appropriate because they can put a sticker on top, they identify quickly for maintenance, people come, know where to go, open it. The other thing where by the time you're putting plantings or box plantings, when you have narrow sidewalks, then you're impeding on the public right of way. So the idea, the approach, the intent was to go on a case by case basis and come up with a solution that worked for that particular building or that particular location. Beyond that, I cannot speak to the contractual obligations, but my understanding at the time, again, this is something that Jeff would know much more. The idea was that was part of the conversation in order to do these, that was going to be done by the contractor, and they would offer the options and then discuss, you know, with the owner. So that's sort of the background of at least the conversations that were had on this topic. Because from the perspective of, you know, the guidelines and the intent, when there's certain things that you just need to have, and it's a matter of safety to have that in order to be, if you cannot position it in a way where it's completely discreet, and it clearly states what it is, then what are the mechanisms that you can use to shield it so that you minimize the impact? Now, I know there's another set where people were also having at the time concerns about, you know, the quality of the work or how the penetrations were done. That is sort of a stipulation that's a different topic, but that's kind of to have sort of the overall context of where conversation had gone, you know, from about 2020 to 2021 to 2022.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think it's important to understand what this thing is that's on the outside of the house. It is a gas riser assembly. It is not the gas meter itself. There's a meter inside most people's homes in their basement. Some people it's on the outside, but in the historic district, it's mostly inside the house. The purpose of this gas riser assembly, and this becomes important in terms of managing this from a governmental perspective as well as an aesthetic perspective. The purpose of this device is to improve the way the gas goes into people's homes, to be able to control it better, to reduce the amount of gas going in, which should potentially save people money. To vent off gas in the event that there's an overload. So this device is designed to vent gas, natural gas. And we'll come on to why that's so important in a minute. But also critically, so that if there's a disaster inside the house, they can immediately turn it off. That is extremely important. The two last things are I think, things that we need to keep in mind. As I started doing this, I started just simply like, what should a cover look like? It's like picking a scab, you know, the more you pick, the more blood comes out. So you'll see in the back, and we'll walk through some of the ideas for how people covered them up. And I got a lot of help from some people, in particular, Benny Beal was very helpful to me in this process. But I copied an earlier version of this with the questions to Delmarva, just Suzanne Sauter and John Wick. Suzanne, the president of City Council, and John Wick for his connection to the Municipal Services Commission. The MSC doesn't have any responsibility for this, but I think as we talk through this, we're going to hit on some things that they do have responsibility for, which have also been done in I would like to say hideous way, but I will say, you know, highly inconsistent with an historic area. You all know what I'm talking about. So we'll get onto that in a minute. Suzanne forwarded the material that I'd already sent you guys before to Valerie Leary, who was present on City Council when a lot of the stuff was being discussed as well. So I don't think we knew until that connection that City Council had been looking at this as well. And what she turned me on to, which I think is very interesting in this process, is that there's legislation in the state of Delaware that governs this. This is not, you know, we think it's ugly. This is in historic districts, they are required to do as careful a job as they possibly can. And I don't know if you all knew that, but I've got the excerpts here and in the PowerPoints that I've sent out. Actually, I don't think I sent this version of PowerPoint to you guys. I embedded those two legal documents. So the first one is public utilities legislation, which talks about residential gas meters and other equipment, specifically focused on gas meters. And then in 2016, there was an update to that legislation, which required in historic districts to work with the homeowner, to do it as aesthetically as possible and so forth. So I'm going to reiterate, they have to follow the law on this. It's not a matter of, making us happy. Lily, you want to say something?
And that actually is something that when this discussion originated, there was a conversation between the city administrator and the city solicitor about what exactly the ramifications, what the texts were they subject to the review by hack or not? What were the exceptions for historic districts or not, and the wording and sort of parsing. So that had been part of the analysis and the conversation also.
Apparently that ball got completely dropped. So no one ever walked it home. But judging from the language in the amendment to Title 26 from 2016, they have to abide by all the rules of the historic area district. There's no question about that. And they also have to work closely with the homeowner. And I would submit to you that the only reason they worked closely with us as homeowners is because basically we zip tied them and wouldn't let them do anything for 2 hours while we explained to them it was not going on the front of the house, because they were determined to put it on the front of the house. And
Can I interject?
Yeah,
that
please.
I know, so at our house, we have a side lot, and it wasn't, I wouldn't say that it was particularly contentious. I think our house was one of the last houses that was done, so maybe they were by that point. But they pushing, well, the front of the house would be easier. It was sort of that, and we were very insistent that it go on the side of the house. And then the engineer that they had came and looked at it and confirmed that it could go. But I also know that at the Reed House, the George Reed II house, 42 the Strand, the director and assistant director had a really, really difficult time explaining to them why it could not go on the front of that building.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've heard that
Well,
from many people.
and imagine people not as obdurate as you and I, just caving after a while, and I think that happened. So none of that was in the spirit of the law or actually the public service. So I feel that we have potentially cause of action. I'm going to recommend some legal activity that follows this up, especially because I think they're about to start on 4th Street now.
Well, and I think a secondary thing is they bring in a subcontractor to do the actual physical drilling. And they did some significant damage to, not significant, but they did minor damage to our basement, which we had just had historically restored. And patched it up using non-historical methods. And I told them to stop because they were not doing it appropriately. And that would not have been that hard since they were already using subcontractors, to find a subcontractor that understood historic masonry.
Agree, and I think on the side, we should start to make a list of all these things, because these are things that need to be addressed individually as well as collectively. What I'm worried about is half the historic district still has to get done. So that's the legal side of it. They have broken the law in terms of what they were supposed to do for the historic district. On the 3rd page, I had Marika print these two up because I just hate wasting paper and toner, but slide 5 of the deck, but 3 of what we handed out. Delmarva did provide a fence solution. Benny Beal told me about the fence solution, and I went to look at it, and nobody in the office knew about it. They didn't know what it was. They didn't know why it was there. It is plastic. It's, can I say hideous in this meeting? It's hideous. It's right here.
Is that what you approved?
No, no, that was one that we had talked about originally, ultimately, when they had, I think that may be one that they had mocked up. And I said, the material is wrong, the intent we want to go with lattice work, but they also had one that was really tall and covered the window, was just placed there. And when we did the walkthrough, on the other hand, they had a couple where it was actually wood lattice work, and they said that would work well, because then they could put a cap, which helps them kind of identify, so that they can flip it when they need to, because when, to your point, when there is an emergency and they have to send people, then they need to be able to know quickly. And sometimes people have lattice work around sort of some of the basement window or things like that. So that way the idea, and I said, okay, that is not offensive. If there's a red sign that says this is where, you know, there's access, that makes sense. So that was a very different proposition.
But in any case, I did validate that this is what they were proposing. Outside the historic district, this might be okay. But inside the historic district, it is absolutely not okay. However, one of the things that, because Benny made a study of this, he's been incredibly valuable in this. Somebody on Harmony Street had just covered their ugly thing up with a box painted white. You know, they tried to make it look aesthetic. In the last windstorm, it blew off. So we can't actually connect them to the walls. They have to be heavy enough to withstand wind, which we get here because we're on the river, and other parts of the city do as well. And so in very many ways, this as it's currently configured is unsuitable. So that does though start to create some standards for how we might try to get them to think about it, you know, if they're going to provide a solution. But again, this is going to require us to take some legal action, I think, for us to get to this point. So then moving on, people have tried to solve the problem. Here, there's a couple of problems. I'm not going to read the slides. I'm just going to talk to you what I've observed. Some of the things that people have done, I think, are dangerous. They put significant impediments in front of these things and make it difficult to get to them, and you're not really clear what's happening. And y'all can look at the pictures of them, or, you know, walk around the city. I put in addresses of ones that I featured in this deck. But the other problem is that if they do not vent adequately, they can explode. Okay, so, and no one would have any warning that that was going to happen, because these things are venting differently for different houses, for different circumstances, whatever. And so if we don't get some kind of standards together on what we should be doing, and it remains a free-for-all, we're actually creating a risk for individual homeowners and for the city at large. And so I put down some of the requirements, and I don't think we need to drain all that right now, but just so that you know, there's a whole lot of criteria. And when I created the questionnaire that I sent them, I tried to tick off that criteria. I think more will come up. The more we talk about it and look at it and hear from people, we're going to hear other things as well. But explosion risk, staying put, and then to your point, Layla, how do you know what it is? Mm-hmm. So let's just
So for clarity, these are initiatives that are taken by property owners themselves to cover it. This is not something that's been done by the contractor.
No.
Okay. Because one of the things, going back to the contractor, what's typically done, and this is something contractual, so I don't want to overstep the boundaries of what I'm supposed to be doing in terms of my services to the city and to hack. But it is fairly easy to have some standard language to put into a contract, which is a qualification requirement. And particularly when it's masonry work, in many of these is the case, or maybe if you know, we're cutting through different types of material, that's something that can be made a contractual, you know, requirement. And then there's a mechanism by which Delbar can make sure to ensure that they have the quality that they need.
Well, how long we've been asking for the contract? Couple months.
Since the initial, well, it was at the initial meeting where we determined to put this on the contract, which we're talking about probably late last summer, early fall. The request was made, or at least to be spoken to.
Well, for clarity, any contract with the municipality is a matter of public records. So it's not a matter of, you know, we can't show you because it's a secret. This is daylight laws require that they be,
Oh.
frankly, they should be published on our website somewhere. So the fact that it's so difficult to get this is a problem, and we do need to look at it. We're not gonna be able to go back and change that contract. If we want Delmarva to do something that's not in that contract, they're either gonna agree to do it, or we're gonna sue them. That's how that will go down. So, it's not like we have a lot of wiggle room depending on what's in there. But to the point I was trying to make about how do you know what it is, turn to page 7 on this presentation. On the top, matching gas cover window and well covers on the house. Looks pretty, but if there's an emergency, what are you doing? You know, how do you know which one is which? So there's no marker on here that says, this is it. I heard anecdotally from John Wick that the yellow wire on the bottom was in case it was buried, so the wire would show you where it is. That's not very helpful here. I guess one of the things that I find confounding is that Delmarva and Exelon, Delmarva is a division of Exelon, in case you all didn't know. Exelon is one of the biggest energy providers in the United States. They do gas and electric and nuclear power. Okay, so they're not a little company. They've been putting these in for a long time. How is it possible that they don't have a tear sheet to give us right now? I don't understand that. And I've told them that in my communications with them. I have acted in an authoritative fashion with them, but I have no authority. So they could tell me to pound sand tomorrow. So, but so far they're being at least semi-cooperative. They've promised no date for when they would deliver the answers to our questions. But the point I'm making here on this particular one, and I didn't write the street address down for this, but this is on the Strand, is that the covers that people are putting over their window wells look just like the covers that they're putting over their gas riser devices. So it's confusing. Maybe that's a good thing if there's an additional item you can put on it, a little flashing light, or I
One
don't know.
question we had was about stickers. They have stickers that are relevant. They said, are you okay with stickers? I said, I'm fine with stickers. It's a life safety matter. They need to identify, you need to be able to interfere.
It's a
That would be
problem.
appropriate,
Yeah.
notwithstanding.
Many people have done cute little houses. There's a wonderful little self-referential cover on Harmony Street, which I put in here, where they made the cover look just like their house. So it's like a mini house in front of the house. Very, very cute. They're a row house. They don't have any choice. It's gonna have to go on the front. So they've done fine. But my question on that one is when I first started talking to Tom at Delmarva, who was our project manager for Delmarva, he said, well, you have to have at least 10 inches of ventilation space. I said 10 square inches, 10 inches in one place, 10 inches on the side, 10 inches on the front. The little house doesn't have 10 inches, doesn't matter how you look at it. And the design of it would trap gas in the top. So yes, it's open in the back. Is that enough? You know, I don't know. So other solutions around town that are just terrifying. There's some on 7 with someone's put a giant stone in front of it. Other people have put decor. I'm gonna be nice about it, decor in front of it, which would make it difficult to reach it. Other people have big pots in front of it or large amounts of vegetation or furniture. Again, in an emergency, should furniture be in front of it? I don't think so. And I don't want to make it hard for people, but you know, these are emergency protection devices for us. So that you all have the questionnaire that I sent them, happy to add additional questions to it. They seem to be engaged. Maybe they will answer us, maybe they won't. And we're starting now, things you've said tonight, we're starting to piece together how did this happen. But we also know now that city council was involved and they were looking at something, Tara, you and I have talked about, is that the city might have to make ordinances on this. Because you can't just leave it to people's judgment of what they do. And there may be some designs that are accepted or ways to mark them that are required or something, but we really need to get to a solution. And I don't think a standardized, everybody does it the same way solution is necessarily right. This is a historic area filled with many unique houses, and we don't want to over legislate. But we need to have some kind of standards of some kind which are enforceable and for which there is an inspection. And perhaps a periodic inspection to make sure that they actually work. Delmarva needs to be sent back to the drawing board on the cover. That's not gonna work, we know that. I think also, we need to have an official meeting with Delmarva, the city does, to say, why did this go down the way it did? And why did you make it so difficult for homeowners who were just trying to protect the historic district? And what is your plan to address that for the rest of the historic district that you're about to install? So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done here. And I'm very prepared to help do that work. I think you guys can see that I've done quite a bit already. But for that, we need a little bit of authority coming from somewhere. And we have a new city administrator about to be appointed, we believe. So, who apparently is an experienced city administrator. I don't know any of their names, but that's what I'm being told. So, so that's kind of where we're at. And so we need to publish from a historic area perspective, from our perspective, the aesthetics. We have to be able to approve the aesthetics. The city needs to provide some kind of guidance and legislation about the criteria. And we need to have an safety inspection process, in my opinion. So that's where I've gotten. I think more to come. But I wanted, since we didn't have anything else on the agenda tonight, I wanted to get this in your heads. Because y'all need to think about this. You know, and what's our interaction with city council? Suzanne is very open, interested, wants to engage. It'll be interesting to see what Jeff has to say when he gets back. But something really didn't work, really fundamentally didn't work on
Absolutely.
this.
Let me say first, thank you for putting this information together. Thank you for the time thank you for the time that you put into this and asking these questions and doing this research. I think with the scope of, you know, the concerns that we have, this obviously goes beyond the purview of what we alone can do. And so I think, you know, working with council is the logical, I think, next step.
Maybe we should ask Suzanne to appoint somebody that's the representative for this topic on city council. I can do that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
I think something we could do now as a group is maybe come up with some questions that we could submit to Jeff for this meeting. A list of items that we would like, materials. I have requested documents that are pertinent to this discussion, to this topic several times. That is one of the reasons this discussion has been pushed back so many times. So I'm hoping that perhaps with this approach, if we can get some specifics in, we will have those ready.
Well, seeing the contract would really help.
I agree.
You know,
It would
and the
really
fact that
help.
people are delivering the contract, I think, you know what I'll do? I'll write to Max and say, give it to us now. He's our lawyer.
Yeah.
Stop fooling around. Just give us, I'll write to him and say that.
And I think, I mean, and I know that there's been a change between, you know, who was a provider, who was doing the work. I do know that when this was initiated, there was very much a collaborative approach about looking at things and talking about, and we had come to say, and this is maybe how we want to go, is just to come up with a menu of options that could be acceptable and then easily customizable to whatever the property was, like what's the width of the sidewalk, what would you prefer?
Yeah.
And I think the fact that raises a lot of concerns is people doing this on their own, what they shown would raise is not just an issue of risk, but liability and legal exposure and all the rest,
Yeah.
which is then it's good to put a cautionary tale if there's an outreach to people for feedback, just to let people know.
Yeah.
That there is that, I always start, whatever I do, I always start by life safety. And then whatever can sort of come after that by creating confusion, so I think people should realize that. But I think that would be a practical way to come up with a menu, which they had discussed. And to try to track that. Meanwhile, I'll just write a little email that I'll send to you, Tara, just recapping the conversations that were had and the direction, the intent where it was going. And then after that, it is definitely beyond my purview to identify where the implementation
Right.
and the enforcement after that has gone awry. That's a different conversation.
I have two extra thoughts. I don't think I have it in this deck, but, Benny painted there, I do. Yeah, it's on page 6. He painted the one at 25 the Strand. And I about had a heart attack. I mean, I don't know what got plugged up by the paint. This is supposed to be venting gas. What if the gas venting was covered up in that process? It was quite clever the way he did it. I recommend you go take a look at it. But if people choose to paint them, which is a thought we had, what are the cautions about that? What kind of paint should we use? Should we still put the sticker on that you talked about, Leila, all that kind of stuff? The other thing is, I didn't have time before this meeting to go through the law, which we now have, but the electric meters, this is a different topic, but the electric meters are just hideous. And they're stuck right on the front of the houses with no covers on them. And it's just such an eyesore. It is such an eyesore. And some of the homeowners were very frustrated. Some of them, I know, for example, that Keith Adams, when they came to put it on the front of his house, he's in an important historic house, the Rosemont House on Delaware Street. He screamed at them until they moved it. He literally had to scream at them. That's the kind of interaction that people are having with these people messing with the historic district. It shouldn't have to be that way. Either that should be part of our thinking about remediation, or at least, again, how do you cover it up so that it's not, in the middle of this beautiful, 18th century village, this truly ugly device sitting right on the front of the house. They're on the front of many houses in this city, and it's not okay. So let's, in our scope, let's try to think about that too.
On the 2016 amendment that you provided, there is a section, it's section.
So it's under obligations of residential property owners.
Yeah.
Section 2, well, I guess it's C. So any owner of residential property is hereby authorized to paint exterior gas regulators, but not the regulator vents.
Right, so what's a regulator?
Right.
Right, exactly. So.
Give me a map.
Yeah. I agree with you.
Exactly. So, right. And that's just the thing, does Benny, I didn't ask Benny, does he know what a vent is? But I don't know what a vent is. And I don't know what paint means. Does that mean get a can of paint, slap paint on it? Does that mean spray paint it? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a real concern. It's this trickle down effect that because things weren't done correctly in the first place and information wasn't conveyed, that there was a means to cover that provided by Delmarva, Exelon, then people are taking it into their own hands because now they have this ugly thing in front of their house and they want to hide it because they're trying to do right by the historic environment and the streetscape. And we're creating a situation where well-meaning people could create a life hazard situation. So it's unfortunate.
So is this the only design that is acceptable for this?
Which design?
The
Oh,
riser.
the lens.
No, I'm sorry, the riser itself.
Yeah, that's actually.
Yes, technically, I can't speak I'm not an engineer, I can't speak, but my understanding was because of the system that was, because my first reaction was like, this is really big, you know?
Like, can it be this high off the ground?
Well, yeah, it's be narrow and small, and we could. And when I first saw my first one, I was like, ooh. I can only believe this, you know, that I can't imagine anybody particularly would go and say, we're gonna put something big and ugly because we didn't want to do smaller and more discreet. Plus there's also a cost associated. Only imagine that it's something that was required, but I am not qualified to speak to that point.
And this was also spoken at the very first meeting, is this is a federal requirement. This isn't just something that,
Yeah.
you know, we decided we wanted to do to upgrade our gas lines. So it's a federal requirement. Everyone has to do it. What are they doing in other areas? I mean, I can't imagine they're going into a high-end neighborhood, historic or not, and putting it right smack in front of their front door. They're going around the back of the house, or they're putting it at the street.
The argument they made to us is we have to use more pipe if we put it in on the side, and I said, get me the violins so I can. Song. I really didn't care,
Yeah.
but, and I think though, we are the Historic Area Commission, but this is a town of 5,000 people. And this ugly thing's gonna go on the front of everybody's homes here, and they also deserve to be protected from that and to have alternative solutions and have the solutions be safe and have their solutions be inspected. You know, it's so half-assed the way this thing has been handled. Nothing has really been thought through, and I actually hold Delmarva accountable for that. They know better. And they should have done a better job for us. And I think we should come into it with that position, you know, you need to fix this.
I know the city can certainly talk to their project managers since they hold the contract. Whoever holds the contract can have a conversation with the project manager and say, you know, the initial conversation with the PM was that X would be done. And if somebody has changed, why has not been conveyed to the next person?
Right.
But those are obviously conversations that one has to be respectful of who owns the contract and who can.
And the city has to do those things, but we can also advise them. And I think when those conversations take place, there needs to be a representative from the Historic Area Commission, from the Planning Commission, and from City Council in those meetings. Because I think part of what happened here was that there was endless slips between cup and lip. A conversation here and things got agreed, and then it moved over here, and then it moved over here. There was no through thread on closing all of these loops off. So
The only thing that I would caution, coming from a place of doing construction administration and as a PM, as opposed to, you know, consultant to hack on historic preservation matters, is to make sure that the communications with Delmarva and whomever's the contractor are going through the appropriate channel.
absolutely.
Because one does not want to have an issue where things are not happening or done differently and somebody says, but somebody from the city, somebody from HAC reached out to us and we know there's a problem, so hence now there's an issue with the timeline. I know you're all highly experienced professionals and know all that, but this is the kind of thing where those items can quickly be interpreted or misinterpreted. Not that I'm saying they would. It's just coming from a plane of caution to find a channel where it comes through the appropriate person at the level of, and when these conversations are had, to always qualify to say, you know, this is not to be construed as a direction in any way, shape, or form. It is not a contractual conversation, you know, and just make sure that those are, because that might potentially, it's been known to backfire where somebody makes a situation even more confusing.
So maybe we need Max in those conversations as well.
Either him or have Jeff reach out, have somebody who's a stakeholder within the contractual relationship.
Yeah.
Make the queries through the channels that are appropriate, because there's a contractual relationship that's connected to a schedule.
Agree.
On the other hand, the quality also that same channel can point out that the factor when working in the district, that is the expectation and should have been conveyed. So I think those would be.
That's why I got him in meeting minutes.
Mhm.
Pretty simple, but it does work.
You know, communications, emails, but documented with the appropriate channel, so there's no muddying the waters should you come to a conversation with other parties or including legal counsel.
I think this is urgent, people. I really do. So, I don't know when Jeff is back, but
I He will be present, or Marika has confirmed that he will be at the March meeting. I do not know when he starts. So I don't know if this is something that we could potentially bring up at the council. Well, we could bring it up perhaps at the council meeting on Tuesday.
I'll mention it to Suzanne that we need to. I've already made 2 commitments. I'm gonna speak to Suzanne about assigning somebody from city council to own this process. And then I'm gonna write to Max, maybe just give him a little bit of background and say, we need the contract. We know that we don't have authority, but we need to see what it said, because we're trying to figure out ourselves what the story is. So, and make him aware that this is a problem. Because I just took his property class yesterday. It was fun.
Does anyone have anything to add to this? Any comments from the public? To say regarding this one?
Jeff said he'll be back the 13th.
Okay,
Oh, okay, good.
My only suggestion was there's clearly safety issues in some aspects of this. Might it be a good idea for the commission to put out a newsletter just saying, this is an issue, watch out for venting? And it just,
I don't think that's appropriate for us to do because we don't have any authority to, that would be the building inspector, the code enforcement, which is, that's Jeff Bergstrom.
would be the right kind, just
Yeah.
something so that people are aware that so that in the cute house enclosure, is there an issue of venting?
We don't know the answer.
Right, but perhaps just sort of an awareness, be aware that this is an issue, and you might want to think about when you are trying to do this, be aware of that.
Well, one of the things I included in the recommendations, but I don't think we're anywhere near doing all this stuff yet, is we need a communications plan. And that's probably gonna come from the city as opposed to from us per se. But what I'll suggest to Suzanne is that we look at a plan that has a pre-communication component that says, we're looking at this now. We've identified some issues. We don't know what all the answers are yet, but here are some things for you all to be aware of. And more information will be forthcoming. I think that's the best that we can do. But we can't do it without city council and the city code people involved. So,
Well, another option is also in parallel to have the city, but potentially just in emails, is to have the city communicate to Delmarva that people are installing their own things and they're concerned. At that point, Delmarva should be sending a letter to everybody saying you cannot cover these without
Yeah.
an approved cover because it raises issues. So then that Delmarva has, they're being told that something's happening, they could communicate directly.
that's a good point, because also they own this. This is their problem, really. We're just trying to figure it out.
Well, again, it goes back to the issue of safety. They are the ones who are managing these connections, so they want to make sure that there's nothing untoward. So
Yeah,
coming from them because various communications, discussing with them through the appropriate mechanism, whether they be willing to send a friendly reminder to everybody that they are not supposed to take this particular aspect of things in their hands unless they get a buy-in. That would be sort of an effective way, and they have the mailing list because they're reaching out to everybody. That's a precautionary measure.
a lot of moving parts, but thanks for having the discussion tonight.
Thanks for your preparation.
Yeah, thank you for this. Thank you for this, this information. This is really helpful. And I think this is put us. Are there any?
I was gonna ask you, I did go through something which is very thorough that way. Commissioner Bat, excuse me. The black plastic, lattice cover, which is hideous, we can all agree. I'm guessing, Leila, that is probably what Delmarva is saying is the adequate amount of ventilation that they need.
I would not make any extrapolation,
Yeah.
interpretation on anything. There's a code for a reason,
Yep.
so I would strongly discourage anybody from going and saying that looks appropriate, I'm gonna put it around. Yeah,
Almost
so, but-
expecting that your communication
yeah,
to Delmarva is by you giving us this hideous thing. And guess what you're saying, that nothing more than this is gonna be acceptable relevant to ventilation.
I think just in keeping it simple, it's telling them this has not been done. People are taking the initiative. This is what's being installed. There is a concern that this is not meeting the appropriate code and a concern of identification. Please take action. And again, that's the kind of thing that the city or somebody else can send and keep it simple. That's what I think. Again, that's not my review per se. So it's not in terms of advising hack, but in terms of next step, that's what I think would be the most productive.
Pete, when I talked to Tom at Delmarva, he said, oh, just 10 inches. I'm like, 10 which 10 inches? And it's not, and you know, you have to,
Great about people that are doing the housing, match the window covers. That then gets confusing for emergency personnel,
exactly,
that it helps, you know, to Layla's point, a sticker, but if it's, you know, if you guys came down and said, hey, it can be lattice, it's gotta be wood lattice, it can have a roof on it, but it has to have this amount, whatever. But
It's still
that's
gonna
for you
need a
guys
sticker,
to
though.
legislate.
it's still gonna need a
So
sticker.
sticker is a requirement. Typically Delmarva would put a sticker.
Yeah,
It's just one of the things that they will, and they told me, would that be? I said, no, sticker is small. I am fine. As long as the thing, the cover looks good. I have no concern with the sticker that
I'm
says.
sure this Foley construction could build some really cool lattice housings about 400 times these houses.
so to that point,
AJ,
if we had some plans that we could publish that were okay. And it's in my deck here, I didn't cover it, but I said, give it to all the local contractors. Because we know who they all are, they all have to register with the city. Just give it to all of them and have a nice life, you know, build them for us.
Again, that goes back to if it's a contractual obligation and a commitment that Delmarva made in their contract, then that is something that tries to get them to implement it before going to. I'm sorry to be seeming to be harping as the process person.
It's
But
optional.
just to keep things within the parameters, because anything that becomes optional, you'd have to make sure that that person coordinated with Delmarva. And that opens like, who would do that? Would it be the contractor? Would they have to come and inspect, is it okay, and things like that?
I see that a little bit differently. The last thing we want to do is accept what Delmarva tells us is the thing to do. Because we'd be having this crappy,
Oh, I didn't mean in the sense of that. I
Yeah.
meant to make sure if somebody's doing, that there's a process, if Delmarva has committed to do it and do it the right way, then that's a conversation where that engagement has to be honored and done the appropriate way.
the law
If
doesn't
not-
require them to do it.
Yeah, but there was a discussion that was part of their commitment to doing it. On the other hand, if you have individuals who want to do that, one, I don't think should be engaged in kind of encouraging or recommending, because as we don't recommend contractors, we don't do that.
No.
The other thing is, again, this is not my bailiwick, but understanding the ramification of getting the appropriate from a term of performance and ventilation. So getting the okay from Delmarva from a technical specification perspective, not from an aesthetics perspective. And I don't know if that's a process that typically they have in place. I mean, actually, I can inquire about that because I have somebody who does work for us.
So I'm very conscious that HAC doesn't like to recommend contractors. And that's not at all what I was saying. What I was saying is that working with Delmarva, we get an acceptable set of options for drawings, and then contractors can go make them for people. We're not suggesting that everybody go to Angelo, even though of course he would like that. But we need to step up a little bit more. Otherwise, all of our interest in making things beautiful and compliant in the historic area is pointless. So, you know, I'd like to see us, in general, I'd like to see HAC step up more and help people with design and things like
Yeah,
that anyway.
a set of appropriate types of design, absolutely.
Yeah.
Those, by pre-vetting those with Delmarva, then that simplifies things. It
Exactly.
Keeps either them accountable or whomever else does the installation.
So the question, when we discussed this before a meeting, the question was brought up about pre-approved options that Delmarva was made to
Mhm.
provide. And then it goes back to the question of, was it in the contract that they had to provide it or only upon request?
Yeah.
It was stated at that time that people who had made the request of Delmarva had been provided appropriate either lattice work enclosures or a planter with plantings at that time. Now, who they reached out to at Delmarva, whether it was the contractor that initially approached them about getting access to the house, or whether there was another person that they would provide to. Jeff said if someone wanted that information, they could reach out to him and he could provide that contact person was not provided to us. But the recommendation was to reach out to Jeff for that person and he would have that information. Now, in any of your materials, whether any of them are the approved recommendations that Delmarva provided one of these homeowners, I can't say, but apparently if they're asked, they will do it. But then that leads to, if you don't know to ask, you don't do it. And then you do something like this.
Bingo.
And then the other question that you're bringing up is then, because we are a historic district and there are people who know historic carpentry better than others and work more related in this, we can't make a recommendation. But if there's a way that Delmarva can subcontract out and there's an open bid, we have nothing to do with it, but if there's an open bid and Rispoli or whoever else wants to put in their name, then maybe that's one way that they can deal with it here, is not just pencil whip something as here's our little plastic job. We've already told you the plastic job doesn't work and it's not appropriate for here. But we have some people working within your parameters. But again, that's outside of our purview and that's something that Delmarva would have to do from their side. But maybe that's something that the city can discuss as acceptable due to the special needs of this community.
Yeah, agree. And I think we need to make it broader than the historic district too, as I said before. We got, 3,000 homes.
Oh,
here
of course,
that are gonna
yes.
be-
Just because
deal
you,
with
yeah,
this.
you live in any of the other neighborhoods, you still don't want an ugly pump on the front of your house. So,
All right, I will continue to learn. If you guys have thoughts, let me know. And I'll keep you copied. We're not allowed to discuss this on email, but I can email you updates about where we are with it.
Yes, indeed, group emails talking about topics that come, exchanges cannot.
It's not
be-
allowed.
It's not
Yeah.
allowed because it's
No.
considered a public meeting.
And that's why when I sent it out, I said, don't reply to all. But I did want y'all to know what was going on. And I'll send you this updated deck because it has the embedded laws in it. So read those before you go to bed. It's be good for sleep.
Yeah, I guess. Is there anything you'd like to add, Leila?
Yeah, I wanted to bring, are there any questions about the gas, the piping, the meters? Okay, I just want to, I know it's not on the topic, but I just wanted to let the commission know. The guidelines were implemented in 2016, the update and the system of the 2-tier review. A few years ago, we sort of did a back check and benchmarked and looked at how that was working, the tier 1 versus tier 2 and how many we're processing through. And it's always a process of revisiting on a regular basis and improving things. There's been a lot of improvement in terms of people actually giving applications that are more complete with backup and photographic documentation, things like that. There's certain things also that need improvement. So I just want you to know that in the next month or two, we're gonna do again that process where it's gonna be looking back, having a deeper bench, since now we go from 2016 to 2024, seeing what's worked or not, revisiting the processes both within the city, within the reviews that we're doing in tier one, within the communication, and also trying to look at the consistency of the application, the criteria, because it's always good to revisit what's being done. And then I'll be working, and then initially working, with Tara, just to bring up, because I have to have also one point of contact when these things are going, and then have that conversation. So based on the findings, there may be some adjustments. Also now that there's been enough time for people to understand and have the information working with Marika, we've been always very stringent about getting that information, and a lot of people are more reactive. But there's still some elements that require improvement, particularly in terms of the justification of why things are being requested and things like that. So I just want to let you know that that's as part of always the process of revisiting and seeing how we can, further implement, best practices and things like that. That's a process that's going to be ongoing over the next couple of months.
Are we intending to do any kind of satisfaction study for people's interaction with HAC as part of that?
That can be done, as a separate aspect. I mean, some things can be as simple as trying to, but I don't know, online surveys are so easy, but it's not as easy because not everybody has to give their email address. But I think that could be sent out as a questionnaire. I know I've tended to have anecdotal conversations, and I've had anecdotal reactions when I have the consultations, but that could also be part of a more formal process. And then we are also looking at opportunities, although there may not necessarily be depending on budget, but we're also further looking at opportunities to take advantage of CLG grants. And
What's that?
certified local government, because one of the things, once Newcastle became a certified local government, because of the fact that it has a local historical commission and it has a local historic district, that opens up potential funding with matching funds that come, and they're updated every year through federal funds that come down. The focus there, we've done the updates, the guidelines, we've done the graphics, we've worked on having training. So some of the next focus is working on more education and trying to find those types of partnerships. So that's just generally the process, working with HAC and sort of never thinking that things are established, just seeing how things can shift and evolve and always be improved. So,
Thank you. One thing I'd like to bring up for our next meeting, to put on the agenda is I would like for us to discuss, and if everyone wants to take the time between now and March to look at the page on the city website. I'd like to have a discussion as to how maybe we can add some things to it. I found some things on the site that needed to be corrected. There was some information that was outdated. But I think we could have, we could request that some things be added, maybe reworded, see what's there, what's still relevant, what isn't, what we, just some things for the group to discuss at the March meeting. I think we should have the second part of this discussion in March, or a continuation of this discussion regarding the gas risers.
they said Jeff would be back on the 13th, so that would be after.
It's February 13th.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like chilling all the way to March 13th. I was like, he's quite lucky.
Yes, that would be very nice, actually.
We can join him there and have the meeting with them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we
I'm
should.
in for that.
Yeah. Is there anything else anyone has to add or you'd like to see on the agenda next one? All right, we're going to have to move the approval of the November 9th, 2023 minutes to March. We don't have a quorum. Well, Layla, would you make? I get no, because you're not a voting.
I'm not a
member,
voting
yeah.
member,
The planning commission went through this when we had all kinds of
Mhm.
problems over the last little while, and Max finally advised us to just approve it with whoever we had, but it's worth waiting one more meeting, but this stuff shouldn't drag on like
No,
this,
it shouldn't, and I think if we don't have the quorum next month,
We'll
of the
just do it.
individuals who are there, we'll just do it, because you're right, these
There
can't,
is a typo in, I noticed, because it was my own name, it's the only reason on the list, but the name was not right. It's on the October 12th, 2023 minutes. Motion was seconded by S. Batty, but I am in fact C. Batty. So that's on the
What page?
first page under the approving the minutes of October 12th, 2023.
I have a feeling it was supposed to be Ms. and they
yeah,
left
I have.
out.
Oh, it's
I have
Ms.
a feeling the end was.
Sorry, we're very formal here. I mean, that's all I was.
No. That's okay. Making it out of here. This one. I think that to be.
Oh, just one other point for you guys. Planning Commission was not able to meet this month because they couldn't get a quorum. Just for your advice, so you know.
I don't know that we've ever not had a quorum here, but
There's 9 people on that commission, so,
that,
yeah.
that's. Sorry.
Yeah.
With that, if there are no public comments, do I have a motion to
Motion to adjourn.
adjourn? Second. All those in favor? All right, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
This is Bill.